Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. I'm Allure Cosplay, and today we break down my Jodah the Unifier Commander deck. Let's go! Let's talk about the commander first. This is Jodah the Unifier. He costs Wooburg to cast. He's a 5/5 legendary creature human wizard. Legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. There's still a few cards I need to replace in this deck, namely I need to get a Planeswalker and a few other creatures. Next, let's talk about the artifacts. Relic of Legends is one of the best artifacts for this deck. It costs 3 to cast, you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, but the best of all is you can tap an untapped legendary creature you control and add 1 mana of any color. I think at this point a Soul Ring and an Arcane Signet are self-explanatory. I am always happy to see Chromatic Lantern in my hand. It only costs 3 to cast, you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, but best of all, lands you control you can tap them for 1 mana of any color. That's amazing for a 5 color deck because I always seem to be missing just that one color to be able to cast Jodah. Gilded Lotus costs 5 to cast, but you can tap it for 3 mana of any one color. Timeless Lotus costs 5 to cast, you can tap it for Wooburg. One of the best legendary artifacts, the Great Henge. It costs 9 to cast, however, this spell costs X less to cast where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You can tap it for 2 green and you gain 2 life. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. Staff of Nin costs 6 to cast. It's an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. You can tap Staff of Nin and deal 1 damage to target creature or player. This artifact is here simply to help me with card draw. Helm of the Host costs 4 to cast. It's a legendary artifact equipment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary if equipped creature is legendary. That token gains haste equip 5. I love Helm of the Host in this deck because I can make a copy of any of my badass creatures. Most of them are legendary aside from one, but that doesn't matter because Helm of the Host says that the legendary rule does not apply to the token. And last but not least, we have the One Ring. It costs 4 to cast. It's a legendary artifact and it's indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until the end of turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. You can tap it and put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So using my commander Jodah the Unifier, I have 4 artifacts that I can cascade from. And let's talk about the instance. Iconic Rift costs 2 to cast. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. If you overload it, it's a board wipe. I did have a regular counterspell in this deck, however I harvested it for a different deck. So this is the counterspell that I have in here now. Don't Say Please costs 3 to cast. Counter target spell, its controller puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Generous Gift costs 3 to cast. Destroy target permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. By the way, I love these. Even though it gives a 3/3 token to the other player, I can destroy target permanent. That means that I can choose between a creature, an artifact, an enchantment, and all of the above. Vampire Tutor costs 1 to cast. Search the library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top. You lose 2 life. And now let's talk about the enchantments. There are a few enchantments in this pile I'm looking to replace. However, I do not have the replacement cards yet, so they're still in the deck. Omniscience is one of them. It costs 10 to cast. You may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. Although I absolutely love this enchantment, it is not legendary, so I cannot cascade from it. I also seem to favor all the other cards in my hand rather than Omniscience, so I've never actually played it from this deck. Propaganda and Ghostly Prison are also 2 of my favorite enchantments. I will probably take those out, but they're amazing. I have them in every deck that could possibly support them. They cost 3 to cast. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that is attacking you. Temur Ancestry costs 3 to cast. Creatures you control have haste. Whenever a creature with the power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Phyrexian Arena costs 3 to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Lurking Predators cost 6 to cast. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise you may put that card on the bottom of your library. Elemental Bond costs 3 to cast. Whenever a creature with the power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Colossal Majesty costs 3 to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with a power 4 or greater, draw a card. And now let's talk about the sorceries. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth costs 7 to cast. It's a legendary sorcery, so I can cascade off of it. Return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Prismatic Bridge costs 5 Uber to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or a planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and then the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Explosive Vegetation costs 4 to cast. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto play tapped, then shuffle your library. Ingaruk's Wake costs 9 to cast. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. Rampant Growth costs 2 to cast. Search your library for a basic land card, put that card into play tapped, then shuffle your library. Diabolic Tutor costs 4 to cast. Search your library for a card, then put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Kodama's Reach costs 3 to cast. Search your library for 2 basic lane cards, reveal those cards and put one into play tapped and the other into your hand and shuffle your library. Demonic Tutor costs 2 to cast. Search your library for a card, put that card on your hand and then shuffle your library. Conflux costs 3 plus Uber to cast. Search your library for a white card, a blue card, a black card, a red card, and a green card. Reveal those cards and put them into your hand and shuffle your library. Cultivate costs 3 to cast. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put one into the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. Ruinous Ultimatum costs 7 to cast. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. Many Partings cost 1 to cast. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. Create a food token. Urza's Ruinous Blast costs 5 to cast. Exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. There are 36 lands. Quite a few of them are dual lands or tri-lands. There are very few basic lands. Simply put, this is a 5-color deck and I need to be able to find all 5 colors as quickly as I possibly can, so I need to have options. And these are my options. There are a few legendary lands in here. They do not work with the Cascade, however, they work with this creature. Shanid Sleeper Scourge costs 4 to cast. He's a legendary creature, human knight. He has menace. Other legendary creatures you control have menace. Whenever you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Next we have Progenitus. He costs 10 to cast. He's a legendary creature, Hydra Avatar. That's a 10/10. He has protection from everything. If Progenitus would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal Progenitus and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. Gold Forged Topteryx costs 2 to cast. He has flying and lifelink. Each legendary permanent you control has ward 2. Old Gnawbone costs 7 to cast. He has flying, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, costs 5 to cast. Vigilance. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes the triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, ability triggers an additional time. That really helps with Jodah. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, costs 7 to cast. She has flying and first strike. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, that source would deal double that damage to a player or permanent instead. If a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half of that damage rounded up. Limvala, Keeper of Silence, costs 4 to cast. She has flying, and activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can be activated. Frodo Bangings costs 2 to cast. Whenever Frodo Bangings or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, the ring tempts you. As long as Frodo is your ring bearer, you must be blocked the Fable. Gandalf the White costs 5 to cast. He has Flash. You may cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had Flash. If a legendary permanent, an artifact entering or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Shieldred the Whispering One costs 7 to cast. She has Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. Etali Primal Storm costs 6 to cast. Whenever Etali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. Delighted Halfling costs 1 to cast. You can tap it for 1 mana, or you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. I love it when I cast Jodah. Speaking of Jodah, Jodah Archmage Eternal costs 4 to cast. He has Flying. You may pay Wooburg rather than pay the mana cost of spells that you cast. Witch King of Angmar costs 5 to cast. He has Flying. Whenever one or more creatures deals combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt combat damage to you this turn. The ring tempts you. Discard a card. The Witch King of Angmar gains indestructible until the end of turn, and you can tap it. Frodo Sauron's Bane costs 1 to cast. Pay 2. If Frodo Sauron's Bane is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with a base power and toughness of 2/3 and lifelink. Pay 3. If Frodo is a scout, it becomes a halfling rogue with. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 more times this game. Otherwise, the ring tempts you. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre costs 11 to cast. When you cast this spell, destroy target permanent. It has Indestructible and Annihilator 4. When Ulamog the Infinite Gyre is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library. Sakashima the Imposter costs 4 to cast. It's a legendary creature human rogue. As Sakashima the Imposter comes into play, you may choose a creature in play. If you do, Sakashima comes into play as a copy of that creature, except its name is still Sakashima the Imposter. It's still legendary and it gains if you tap 4, return Sakashima the Imposter to its owner's hand at the end of turn. Wrath Ship's Mage costs 4 to cast. He has Flash and Flying. You may cast historic spells as though they had Flash. That's basically legendaries. Aurelia costs 6 to cast. She has Flying, Vigilance, and Haste. Whenever Aurelia attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Vega the Watcher costs 3 to cast. It has Flying, and whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, draw a card. This works well when I have Cascade going. Piru costs 8 to cast. He has Flying and Lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Piru unless you pay 3. When Piru dies, it deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. Klauth costs 7 to cast. He has Flying and Haste. Whenever Klauth attacks, add X mana of any combination of colors where X is the total power of attacking creatures. Spend this mana only to cast spells. Until the end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Falthies cost 3 to cast. Commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. Haljar Bodyguard costs 2 to cast. Sacrifice him, and legendary creatures you control gets +1/+0 and gain indestructible until the end of turn. Skrulf Defector Might costs 1 to cast. It has Toxic 1 and it can't block. Pay 1 white or 2 life, and you can tap this creature, choose a color, another target creature you control gets Toxic 1 and Hexproof from the color until the end of turn. It can be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. I'm going to butcher this one, but I'll try nonetheless. Ratadabrik. Ratadabrik. I don't know, my Bulgarian accent is coming through for this one. It costs 4 to cast. It has Vigilance and Ward 2. Other zombies you control have Vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not a legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Akroma costs 7 to cast. It has Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, and Trample. At the beginning of each combat, until the end of turn, each other creature you control gets +1/+1 if it has Flying, if it has First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Protection, Reach, Trample, Vigilance, and Partner. Last but not least, I have Ragavan. He costs 1 to cast. Whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until the end of turn, you may cast that card. You can dash for 2. Well, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more random nerdy content from me. Don't forget to click the notification button so you know when I upload next. Bye!